So, I'm a little late to the Ozark hype, but after finally finishing the series, I've got a lot of thoughts. Thoughts that the internet has talked about over and over again, but I'm new to this, so I figured I'm gonna make a video about it. Now, usually I'd be making a video covering each season in depth, the highs and lows, the good, the bad, but I went into Ozark with the intention of not making a video about it, so I didn't take extensive notes or anything like that, but at the end, I still wanted to talk about it. So instead of the usual video, I'm gonna make a bit of a shorter one talking about the season, episode, and moment that Ozark hit its peak. But before that, I will go over my general thoughts on the show as a whole, each season leading up to its peak, and my thoughts afterwards. This is a new sort of video for this channel, so if you've been around for a while, let me know your thoughts on this format, and if you'd want to see me do this for other shows. Without further ado, let's talk about Ozark's peak moment. Also, full spoilers ahead. So I did actually watch season 1 of Ozark when it released back in 2017. There was a lot of hype surrounding the show, talking about how it was the spiritual successor to Breaking Bad, and while I saw the comparisons, I also didn't quite agree with them. When I first watched the show, I was a freshman in college, everybody seemed to be talking about it, and I felt like I was just missing something. The show never quite captured me the same way that a lot of other shows did, and that it captured a lot of other people, and I couldn't quite place my finger on what that was until I watched this season again. And I think the reason why season 1 never truly captivated me is because it's not really that great of a season. It's not bad by any means, still a step above most other TV shows out there, but there were a lot of growing pains. Character development, side stories, and pacing weren't very strong in this first season, but there were definitely signs of strength, notably Jason Bateman and Julia Garner. Seeing this dynamic change and flourish over the course of the season was the biggest highlight and one of the center points of the entire show. But there were an equal amount of things that felt right, but just a little bit off. Charlotte's entire character seemed to be going in one direction in this season, just for the later seasons to not really do anything with her. Remember when she met this guy and went out to party with him? How about when she was apparently a really good swimmer and then almost drowned, just to break this entire plot line for a flashback episode about how Marty got involved with the cartel in the first place? A lot of this season just felt all over the place, but season 1's greatest strength was its tension and tone. You really felt like Marty was up against the world and that there was no way he was going to be able to launder all this money successfully. The tone was dark, and the Ozarks apparently never had any sun, so the atmosphere was always dark and intense and menacing, and it worked spectacularly for the show. But Marty was on borrowed time, trying everything from buying up different establishments to trying to get other establishments to change their lights so that way the store felt more welcoming. By the end of the season, Marty successfully bought himself more time, and thus another season, but I still wasn't quite bought in, and I can see why I didn't continue watching for a second season back when I first watched this, but with all the seasons out, luckily all I had to do was hit next episode. Season 2 of Ozark was a big step up. The storylines felt more focused, the stakes felt clearer, and it didn't feel like the Bird family was up against the world. It felt like their goals were ambitious for sure, hard to achieve, but it didn't feel insurmountable. With things like Cade Langmore out of jail, Agent Petty getting closer to the truth, the Snells forming an uneasy alliance with the Birds, and the arrival of Helen Pierce, the tension was still there, even times where it felt like the tension was at an all-time high, but the story of the season felt much more cohesive. There weren't any dead ends, the character development and the dynamics felt a lot tighter, and the tone of the show overall was more solidified. This was the show that everybody must have been talking about. Each and every episode furthering the story, heightening the tension, giving you people to root for, root against, and sometimes a healthy mix of both. The side characters became more interesting and important, specifically Buddy Deeker, who was around in the first season, but I didn't feel like he bonded enough with the birds to end up saving them. In this season, Buddy was part of the family and one of the more tragic deaths in the entire series. I will say, however, I was slightly disappointed in the finale itself. Seeing Cade Langmore be the one to take out Agent Petty just to get killed himself and not see Ruth's reaction to that, sure, maybe the way these deaths played out was more realistic over cinematic, doesn't stop it from being a bit underwhelming. But I felt like the show had hit its stride and hoped to see it continue, which it did, delivering its best season of the series with Season 3. Side note here, but I feel like a lot of times Season 3 of shows ends up being the best or one of the best seasons. Season 1 lays a baseline. Sometimes it's the best season of a series, unfortunately. Season 2 tries to go bigger, but not necessarily better. And Season 3 reels it back, delivering a smaller scale story while focusing on developing the characters. And that's exactly what Ozark Season 3 does. Don't get me wrong, there's some incredibly ambitious moments in this season. Marty being kidnapped and tortured by Omar Navarro himself just to kind of test his loyalty was a huge turning point in this series and for Marty as a character. Having Helen in the Ozarks and see her friendship with the birds reach its peaks and valleys was incredibly interesting, but what truly separates Season 3 from the rest is the character of Ben Davis, played by Tom Pelphrey. Now, I hadn't seen Tom Pelphrey in anything before watching this show, and he's now become one of the actors that I will actively seek out the projects that he's in. Ben went from a side character to somebody that I thought was pretty good in the show to delivering one of the all-time great performances in the history of television. Ben was a character we had heard mentioned in the previous seasons. Wendy had talked about her mentally ill brother, how she's worried Jonah might end up just like him, but we never got any indication as to where he was or if he was even alive. So when we finally see Ben in the opening minutes of the second episode, we get a scene that perfectly encapsulates his entire character. Ben seems like your everyday cool substitute teacher. He's charming, relaxed, but when something starts interrupting the class, he takes notice. The class is sharing a photo of one of the girls in the class, a photo that everybody's laughing at, of a girl being taken advantage of. Ben quietly goes up to the girl and asks what's wrong, finds out what everybody is laughing at, and in his attempt to help this girl, he takes everybody's phones, goes outside, and throws them in the wood chipper. His anger so intense that he takes it out on one of the workers. And this is just the absolute perfect way to introduce this character, because it mirrors his entire journey throughout the season. He starts off very calm, cool, and collected. Wendy even thinks that he might be different now. But as the season goes on, as he becomes more involved in the bird business and the personal lives of everybody else, he tries his best to do what's right. And in some cases, he actually does some good. He saves Ruth's life because he followed her to a drop-off point. He becomes close with Jonah in the absence of Buddy, even trying to become the new version of Buddy for Jonah. His heart is in the right place, which is unfortunate, because just about every person he meets, their heart is in the wrong place. As the season goes on, Ben starts to make mistake after mistake, all in the name of trying to do what's right, but going the absolute wrong way about everything. And that brings us to Season 3, Episode 9, Fire Pink. After trying to save Helen's daughter and tell her the truth about what her mother does and what his family does, Ben essentially marks himself for death. Everyone from Marty to Ruth explains to him that he can't fix this and he needs to run, so Wendy takes him away, hoping to drive him somewhere safe where he can lay low and just tell Helen that he's disappeared. but that's not what Ben intends to do. He intends to fix his mistake, to try and help in any way he can. He calls Helen, apologizing for this mistake, breaking the promise and trust of his sister Wendy. When she falls asleep, he calls for the police, saying that he's being hunted down by the Navarro cartel. It's the police. Of course they're gonna help him, but he doesn't realize what kind of spot that would put Wendy and Marty in and their entire family. She gets them out of that situation and seems to finally reach through to Ben with just how much danger he's in and how this is the best course of action for all of them. But at just their next stop, Ben buys another phone with the intention of calling Helen to, again, try to make things right. At this point, Wendy knows he's not gonna stop, and there's nothing for her to do. She takes him to a diner, asks him what he wants his life to look like in 5 years, and he says he wants to be a goat farmer. She goes to the bathroom, but ends up leaving, having already called Nelson from the cartel, informing him of her brother's location. And this is the moment I believe Ozark hits its peak. The audience isn't aware that Wendy has already made the call to Nelson, so we think this scene in the diner is about her reminiscing with her brother on the past, trying to get him to focus on the future, but with a standout performance from Laura Linney, we can tell that something is off. And interestingly, the camera follows Wendy as she leaves, as she gets on the phone with Marty, and we don't get to see what happens with Ben. We don't get to see his reaction to Wendy leaving him, we just get Nelson walking up to him as he stands outside the diner. This is intercut with Wendy crying, screaming, and just her overall grief while on the phone. We don't get to see what happens to Ben here. We know what happens to him. This isn't a case of, oh, if you don't see the character die, then they might be alive. And not seeing this death is what makes it so haunting. Wendy gave up her own brother. We see that she didn't really have a choice, that Ben wasn't gonna stop, but the reality and the truth of that situation still packs a mighty punch. Ben seems like a lost puppy, looking for where his mother went, and overall, he's been abandoned. This is the greatest moment in all of Ozark. This is what happens when somebody trying to do good comes across this lifestyle. It forces Wendy to make the ultimate toughest decision of her life. I'll also cheat here and give another moment where I believe this show peaked, because it's in the same episode, and that's the opening scene and Ben's monologue. In this scene, Ben talks about how his mind works, how he can have good days, but will think about all the bad in the world, how he remembers what his mind was before the thing that messed it up. He goes on and on for about 5 minutes before telling the taxi driver, yeah, my day's good, how's yours? Meaning that all of this stemmed from that simple question, the most basic small talk conversation people have, but Ben's mind went to all kinds of different places, which really sets up the rest of the episode and shows us why his mind can't quite comprehend what Wendy is trying to tell him. Ben as a character is one of the more unique characters I've ever seen in a story. He's incredibly likable, yet incredibly frustrating, to the point that we want to root for him and we do care for him, but we can't because he doesn't have a place in a story like this. Wendy and the other characters highlight Ben's mental illness, as if that makes him inferior to the rest of them because he's not like them, he's not normal, when in reality, Ben is probably the most normal person in this story. He reacts to the craziness around him like it's crazy, because it is. When Ben goes off of his meds, we see the change in behavior, a change for the worse that gets him and everybody around him in a whole lot of trouble, but what Ben and what Tom Pelphrey achieved with this character is incredible. This is one of the best portrayals of somebody with mental illness that doesn't diminish them. We don't hate Ben, we don't think less of him, we think of him as a person that needed help, and no one in his life was able to get him that help, not even himself. We think of him as that lost puppy right up to his final moments. And throughout the next season, Ben haunts the entire narrative in the form of missing posters with his face on them, Wendy's father and his church group coming to look for him, which causes a whole other set of issues for the birds, and most notably, his ashes that are kept with Ruth in a goat cookie jar. Ben is the reason for a lot of the events of season 4. Ruth continues to distance herself from the birds largely because of Ben's death. They get some business opportunities because Wendy throws a story around that Ben is missing. Even Jonah starts to resent his family because of what happened to Ben, leading his character to have a much bigger role, and that was an aspect that I actually really liked in season 4. Season 4 is eventful. The FBI and the birds are now working in tandem along with Omar Navarro, but Navarro's family members make this quite difficult, leading to other problems, Ruth going down a darker path, Darlene and Wyatt getting married, which has nothing to do with Navarro but is equally as disturbing, and every deal that will get the birds out of this life ultimately ends in failure, up until the very end. Now, with shows that are out in their entirety, I always get very worried when I scroll to the final episode and see a rating like this. With how bad a lot of series finales seem to be nowadays, it makes the time spent going through the series maybe not worth it if the finale or the final season is bad. But this rating is an intriguing one. It's not on the level of Game of Thrones or How I Met Your Mother or Dexter, but it seems to be not for everyone, and I do get why that is. This season ultimately doesn't feel like a final season, because nothing bad happened to the birds. Sure, there was a car crash that they, for some reason, showed us in the first episode that ultimately ended up having 0 consequences. Navarro is taken care of, the birds have a deal with the FBI that gets them out of their duties, and they get to keep everything they own. This is ultimately a pretty happy ending, right? Well, not really. Throughout the 4th season, there's a private investigator around the Ozarks, first investigating the disappearance of Helen, then investigating the disappearance of Ben. He's a good investigator. He finds out the truth behind just about everything, doesn't take the deal that Wendy and Marty make for him, and in the final moments of the series, he confronts the birds, with Ben in hand, 2 people who had nothing to do with any of the birds' dealings and just wanted to do good. Both of them, in these final moments, defeated, along with just about every other person that the birds have come in contact with. Sam became a gambling addict. He lost his fiancée, his mother, and all of his finances because of the birds' intrusion. Mason, his wife, and of course their baby all got either killed or their lives changed forever because they met the birds. Rachel was forced to become an FBI informant to the worst FBI agent ever. Even the good FBI agents, like Maya, ended up having their careers derailed because of the birds. Even the other not-so-great people in the show, like the Snells or the Casey mob, all ended up losing their lives due to business with the birds. Jacob and Darlene had an entire operation they had set up for a long time go absolutely haywire as soon as they started working with the birds. We even find out Tuck lost his job at the Blue Cat Lounge, and Marty never gave him another one. And the biggest victim of the birds is, of course, Ruth and the other Langmores. Even as far back as season 1, Ruth was forced to kill her own family to save Marty. Wyatt, the smartest of the Langmores, might have gone on to college had it not been for the birds, not dying hours after marrying Darlene Snell. While Ruth made some decisions that got herself in trouble in season 4, she was placed in these circumstances because of them. Sure, not all of these people were good, but some of them were. Some of them would have gone on to live long and happy lives had it not been for the birds. A lot of these people put themselves in bad situations the birds actually tried to get them out of, but each and every decision can be traced back to the birds arriving in the Ozarks. So is it a happy ending that nothing bad happens to them? No, it isn't. The last line spoken in the series is by Wendy, where in response to Mel Saddam saying that they can't get away with this because that's not how the world works, she says,
"Since when?"
The bad guys won. They always do. And in a show based in as much reality as Ozark is, I think that whole message is more relevant now than it was even just a few years ago. Nothing bad will happen to the birds because they caused so much destruction along their way that there's nobody else in their way. Even when the government gets involved, they just get off scot-free. And I think the look on Marty and Wendy's faces says everything you need to know about how they feel about their choices. It's a dark ending. It's a realistic ending, and I think it's very fitting for a show like Ozark. So those are my thoughts. Again, if you've been around the channel, let me know what you think about this format, and if you want to see other videos about other series that aren't quite as in-depth as my longer, hour-long videos, but I talk about the season, episode, and moment that I believe to be highlights. And if you want to see my ratings for each season of Ozark, go and check out my Instagram page. Special thanks to all my channel members, and I'll see you all in the next one.